Welcome all to our advanced webinar this afternoon. My name is Simon Dickinson. Just a little bit about my background. I've been working in the CAD industry now for probably far too long. I'm a BIM technical manager here at Greatech. I've probably been using CAD since I left university, and pretty much Revit since Autodesk purchased the product as well. And I've been an advocate of BIM for 12 years plus, and so I've really enjoyed my time sort of pushing this new technology forward. If you have got any questions during the webinar, please do put them in the notes at the bottom, and we'll try and answer them towards the end. I'll try and leave about 5–10 minutes for questions and answers at the end. If you've got any other specific questions that you'd like to get in touch with me, my email's there on the screen. Feel free to drop me an email, and I'll try my best to either get back to you myself or get one of my colleagues to do so. Just a quick overview of what we're going to be covering this afternoon. Basically, we're going to start off in the Revit software, and we're going to look at the different coordinate systems that we have within Revit. There's basically two main coordinate systems in Revit. So we have the project coordinates and then the shared coordinates. So we'll look at how they work, how we can manipulate them, and then how we can use them within a sharing environment as well. Next, we'll move on to a process called Copy Monitor. And what Copy Monitor allows us to do is it allows us to move multidiscipline. So we can move between architecture to the structural engineering to the M&E guys, and we can start to help to monitor change between these disciplines. And I'll show you how that works. We'll also join that as well at how we link the files together. So the use of this idea of project coordinates and shared coordinates and how these files actually link. After that, we're going to move on to Navisworks. And we'll start looking at how we can actually link our models into Navisworks. Again, how these same shared coordinates that we're using in Revit will be used again within our Navisworks model. I'll show you some timelining where we can actually create construction detailing and construction timeline based on a timescale, a Gantt chart, how that information can then be exported, other ways of importing data. We'll look at the quantity takeoff tools in there as well, where we can start to look at, from a QS's point of view, how they can utilize our models as well. Then we'll look a bit at clash detection and how the clash detection within Navisworks then allows us to create reports and then actually come back and find a resolution to that as well. Okay, so lot to fit in within the next sort of 45–50 minutes before we get to our question and answers. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to nip down and launch a copy of Revit. I've already started a little bit in here. What we've actually got open here is the new 2016 version of the software. Let's get rid of that panel for the time being. So there's a couple of changes that have been added in the 2016. Everything that I'm actually going to show you this afternoon is completely relevant to the previous releases of Revit, probably going back to about 2007, most of the features that I'm about to show you. Okay. So I've currently got some grid set up in here, but I'm going to go ahead and develop this forward and put a building together. So we'll just come in, choose my wall type, set my level, and then I can actually draw this in. We'll put an offset in there as well. So I could put an offset around that wall, say the grid 300 mil, and we can come in and I can draw up my building. Okay, we'll pop some internal partitions in there as well, so we've actually got a little bit of the building coming together. I'm not going to do anything too complicated. Okay, and we'll have another wall in there. It's a little building. Okay, I've left my offset on there, but it doesn't really matter. Nothing to stop me aligning that wall back into there should I desire it. Okay, that was the other way around. Been using AutoCAD this morning. There we go. I can even lock that, and that will associate it to the grid line as well. Pop in a couple of doors so that we actually have our building something like, and we'll also then put in there an external door as well. Okay. So from a point of view of the architect can now start to monitor that in. Now, if I just go to my site tool here, you'll notice on the site view we've got these two icons. And these are our coordinate systems. If you ever go into a project and you can't see this, or you want to see them actually on a floor plan, you go into your visibility graphics, come down to site, and in here we've got the project base point and our survey point. Okay, so these are our two defined coordinate systems in Revit. There's actually a third coordinate system, which is the internal coordinate system, which the other two sort of are relatively related back to. So when you start a new project, 0, 0, 0 is pretty much the middle of where the elevation markers are on a normal project template. At any point, I can actually come into here and I can start to look at my coordinates, and I can start to specify coordinates at a point. So this is probably my easiest way to start looking at how I want to change the base point within my project. Yeah. So we can actually set a point in here, and I can start to put my northings and eastings in here. And I can set that, in this case, as a 0, 0 location. Notice that my survey point will go to that point. I could also, at that point, use the OS grid coordinates to set that up as well. So I could actually specify an OS grid point there as well. Now, the idea of specifying coordinates to point is I don't want to set my 0, 0, 0 to an OS 0, 0, 0, because that would be too far away. The Revit software has got a maximum area. There's a practical one of a 20k radius, so you've got a 40 kilometer wide site. But in reality, you could possibly go further than that, but we don't recommend it. So by specifying a point to OS grid, we're actually not having a 0, 0, we're having a specific point defined. The other thing we can do as well, if I just come to one of my elevations, I can go to my coordinates and specify coordinates at the point again. I can select a level. So here I can actually look at setting a physical elevation for my building. And in this case, I'm going to leave it at 32 meters above sea level. So that's currently set to 32 meters above sea level. But as you can see here, my level is still set in a value of 0. This is where my project coordinates come in. So my project coordinates allow me to work at a simplistic number where my ground floor is at 0, my first floor is up at 4 meters, but I'm not looking at what the exact value of them. I'm thinking of the value of if I was building that and measuring it on site itself. If I want to change that, if I actually select my level marker, there's normally some already set up in here. So I've actually got a circle head. This is already loaded in my template. If it wasn't, if I select it and go to edit type, you'll actually see in here that it's actually the elevation basis, project base. I could change that to survey point. As it is, if I just select my marker again, change this now to be my shared, the shared datum is actually listed. So I can have two separate views. I could have one view where it's actually showing my shared. I could change this to another view where it's actually showing me my project. Okay, so we'll just change that back. Now the other thing to remember with the coordinates is if I come back to my ground floor plan here. Okay, so if I move over here, within my view settings, I've actually got an orientation. And currently the orientation is set to project north. What I mean by that is I'm keeping my building perpendicular for drawing purposes. But I also have in here the ability to set up true north. I've changed it to true north, and currently my building hasn't moved. This is down to the fact that I haven't yet set true north up. So what I can then do is I can come in, I can go to my manage again, position, and I can rotate to true north. Now a little bit of advice for you here. What some people will do at this point is they will point where north is, and then they will rotate it. And we think that's absolutely fine, and we shouldn't have any problems. Notice where my shared coordinate point, my 0, 0, 0 point is now not where I expected it. I specified that point. Because that is the point I specified, that really should be the point at which I rotate my building round. So just a bit of advice, when you actually are going to rotate true north, make sure that you place the rotation marker where it is. Point it in the direction of north. If you actually know the rotational angle, then we can set that up at a counterclockwise rotation, or I can simply specify my rotation to true north. Okay. Of course, I don't want to work in that orientation, so again, come back to our orientation here, set that back to project north. I now can work perpendicular. Okay. If I came back to my site plan, it might be useful to have the site plan set to always display my true north, and then my site plan will always be facing north. Okay. So that is now start from an architectural point of view. I'm just going to now hit just save this drawing, and I've got another session of Revit open here, which has already got start. I've already started with a structural template. What I can then do is I'm actually going to insert a Revit link. Okay, so I'm going to insert into here from my desktop this arc drawing. Now, when I'm inserting this drawing here, what I've actually got is I've got a positioning, and my positioning is quite important. So I've got origin to origin, by shared coordinates or manual. Yeah, I'm going to use the auto ones. Center to center is not really the best one because depending on the size of your model, this would be the center. If you drew a circle that perfectly encapsulated your model, the center of the circle would be the center to center. As your model changes size and expands, the center will move. The origin, this is now where we're relating back to the project base point. Okay, so we can start to insert by origin to origin. We can also go by shared coordinates. I cannot use shared coordinates yet because my structures model currently does not understand what the shared coordinates are or what the coordinates are in the architect's model. So the first thing I would do is I'd fetch it in origin to origin. So we'll fetch this in, okay? And all you can see at the moment is that we've got the grids. The reason being is I've currently got the view discipline here set to structural, and none of the elements that I've currently created within my architecture file were actually structural. So I can come into here. I could set this down to coordination, and that will then start to show me this model with a little bit more detail. The view ranges out so you can't see the doors, etc. Plus, I'm actually on the higher level. Yeah. I go back to this one again. If we just set this one to coordination, so we can see what's going on. There's my openings. Can't see the doors just because it's a structural template. Yeah, the doors are actually hidden within the view template. Okay. So what I've now got is I've now got the architect model inside the structural design. So I'm going to start drawing some structural elements here in a second. First thing I'm actually going to do though is I'm going to just come into here and change my view to true north. The model hasn't moved this time because the coordinate system is currently not set up within this structural file. So the first thing I can do now is I can utilize the coordinate system that was actually set up by the architect. So I can come into manage, go to my coordinates, and this time I've got the ability to acquire the coordinates. Hit acquire, select the link, and notice that this model is now rotated. This is now rotated to the exact same orientation as the architect. We are now using the exact same shared coordinate system. Yeah. What you will find though is if you actually go into site and turn on our project and survey points, yeah, they are now my survey point for the 0, 0 is in exactly the same place, yeah, because it has now copied that across and it understands. And we've got the rotation at true north. Now, I don't really want to modify the architect model, but what I'm now going to do is I'm going to use a set of tools called Copy Monitor. And Copy Monitor will allow me to take certain elements from another file, either the architect or the M&E, that I actually then want to monitor the relative location of that object, so that if the architect makes a change in the future, I can actually see what them changes are, and I can choose whether to have my model abide by them changes or whether not to abide by them changes. So, go to Collaborate, and within here now I've got a Copy Monitor option. So I'm going to come into here, I'm going to select the link, I'm going to choose the linked file. Okay. And I now have various different options I can choose from. So I've got the ability to specify the levels, copy the levels, I can copy the grids, I can copy columns, I can copy walls, and I can copy floors. Okay. Notice if there was any beams in there, it doesn't give me that option. It's mainly the vertical elements and the datums that I'm more interested in. In fact, in this case, I might just do the walls and the grids. So if I come into my levels, I can choose an offset. Maybe I'm wanting to change this to a structural level, etc. Maybe I want to put a suffix on so that we can understand which are which. So what I'll do is I'm going to have a prefix on the level. Let's add a prefix of S hyphen. On my grids, I'll have a suffix on there of hyphen S. And the walls, I can choose to just copy them as generic. So wherever it finds a curtain wall, I haven't got any of them set up, but it is in the template, I can choose what type of wall type I want to copy it across to. What I could choose to do is to actually get it to copy the original type. This is very useful because I probably don't have half of these wall types set up currently in my structural template, which means if they are in use in the architect model and I'm going to need that later on, I can pull that across. Nothing stopping me changing it later, but it means I can copy that across. Okay, I'm not worried about the columns of the floors because I haven't got any of them set up. So we can click OK. Next thing I need to do is to choose to either copy or monitor. If you choose copy, it will automatically monitor as well. I will come on to what the monitor tool does in a second. So we'll go to copy. I'm going to choose multiple because I want to copy multiple elements in this first selection. And I'm going to select all the grid lines. Hit finish. And what we should see now is it's actually created in here another grid over the top of the architect. But notice this is no longer in the linked file. This is my grid. Okay? And this is at 1-S. Okay? What you might be able to see as well is just here on the middle of my screen I've got a little heartbeat. And that's showing me that it's monitoring the location of that grid line. Basically, if the architect now attempts to move any of the grids and I get an updated version of that file, it is going to notify me that that's changed and then give me a report. And we'll look at that in a second. Okay? So we'll just do a little bit more on this. So just nip over to one of my levels, my elevations. Okay, and you'll notice that I've got some levels already set up. There's a level 0, there's a level 1 set up there, which will probably give me a little bit of a problem. So what I'm actually going to do is, actually no, it should be okay. Let's go to copy, multiple, and then I can copy the levels that I'm interested in, which is this one and this one. Okay, and I'm going to hit finish. Okay, and it has now copied the type across, and we've now got 2 levels that are being monitored. Okay. So just be aware that level 1 is the bottom, and then I've got my S level. So these are my S level 0s and S level 1. Notice it hasn't created the views for these. I will have to go in and do that again afterwards. Next thing I want to do is I'm just going to go to the 3D view. Can't see anything in there at the moment, so we'll just change the discipline to coordination. Okay, and then I can go copy, multiple, and we'll copy the walls as well. Hit finish. Okay, and that will copy the walls across. And we can see that they're being monitored. And just to show you that they are now in my model, it's finished the monitoring process for the time being. If I go to visibility graphics and go to my Revit links, and I'll just hide the link. Okay, these elements are still there. Look. And every time I click on an element that's being monitored, I can tell that that's being monitored because it will actually give me my little heartbeat. So I could then now move further forward and start to create my structural elements within here. Okay? So what I'm going to do, and go to my level 2, and let's just put some structural items in here. So let's put some columns in, and I'll do this by grids. So we'll select them. I'll cancel that because I don't want to put that particular column in. I could change it afterwards, but I think it was a little bit too substantial. Okay, and there's my columns in there. And once I'm happy with the location, I'll hit finish. Okay, just set that to a fine level of detail, and we can start to see my column sat in there. Just about fits. Cool. Now, let's just finish that off and go to my beams. We'll go by grids again. It's a nice quick way of doing it, and we will also put my beams in there. Okay. If I go to my 3D view, we've now got my beams set up in there. Yeah. Notice that I did set them all at the wrong level, which is a bit naughty. I didn't copy monitor the way that the level went, but we can see that they're running there. In fact, I'll just undo that and go back to my level 2. Remember, I forgot to mention that I need to change my floor plans. So structural plan needs to be set up for my 2 views. Okay. There's now my S level 1, which is the one that I want. Let's just fix this problem. Got my structural columns. They actually need to go up to S1. And then we'll put the beams back in. Okay. So they are now set up. If I now go to my 3D view, we can see they're in the right place. And we'll just save this model now, and we'll save that one to my desktop again. We'll call this one struct. Okay. So we now have an architectural model, and the structural engineers got involved as well. Now we can round trip on this, because if I now come back to the architects file, I can now go insert, link a Revit file. I want to link the structural file that we've just created. But what I want to also do is I want to come into here, and I actually want to now change the origin to by shared coordinates, because we've already got the same coordinate system in both files. If I go to my shared coordinates, click open, fingers crossed, and it has indeed, it's popped it smack bang in the right place. And if I go to my 3D view, we can start to see elements that have actually been set up in there. Now, it may be that these are internal partition walls and that I don't want them to go all the way up to the level. Yeah, so I could choose to select these walls. Notice these two walls showing there because we've got the structural model. I'll just hide the structural file in there a second. I'm just going to modify these, and I could say, right, so I need to remove them, reduce them walls down. They're a little bit too high. So it's going up to the level. Top offset, let's put a minus, that's the extreme, put a minus 400 in there. Well, let's set that to get away, probably minus 600. Okay, so I've got a minus 600 drop on them walls. The other thing that I might do as well is if I go here, I might decide that I actually want to move this wall, and I'm going to move that wall by moving the actual grid line, and we'll update that accordingly. Still got two walls in here because the other wall is actually from, again, the structural engineers file. So we'll just hide that there. So I've now made a change to my model, one by just creating change on my walls, and the other by actually moving that grid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save my changes to that file. Okay. So we'll hit save, and then what I can do is go back to my structural model, and in here now, I'm going to go to my view, my insert, sorry, go to my manage links. Yeah, got my Revit file, and I've now been told that I've got a new version of this. I could either close and restart this project, or I can come in and we can do a reload. If for any reason the architect has changed the name of that file, i.e. it's got a revision number on the end of, in the file name, then I simply go to reload from. That will allow me to select the new file. Hidden in the background within the Revit file, every project has a serial number. Every item that we create has a serial number. That number is unique in that project's instance. The only time you can actually physically change that value is to delete and recreate the object. So even though I've gone reload from, completely different file name, Revit will understand that it is the same file. So we'll just do a reload. Okay, and hopefully it could pop up, and here we see instance of a link file needs a coordination review. So what this is basically saying is it's saying that something has changed in my model. There's something in here that it knows has changed. It's not telling me what at the moment, but it says if I run a coordination review, it will tell me. So we'll go OK. Obviously, if I come into here now, we should actually be able to see, if I put the VG and turn the Revit links back on, yeah, so we can start to see where that wall's moved. Yeah, we can see that the walls are actually smaller in there, but we can see what's actually changed. So what I'll do is I'm going to go to my Collaborate tab again, and I'm going to go to my Coordination Review. I'm going to select the link. Here we go. So I've selected the link, and what it's saying is, right, okay, a grid has moved, yeah? Also a wall's moved, yeah? The wall position has moved, which is actually related to this grid, and there's also something else. Now, don't forget, my walls in the structural model are not locked to my grid, but the grid is, yeah? The wall and the grid are actually independent. So if I come now ahead to the grid has moved, I've got an option. First of all, which grid's moved? If I come down into here, it's telling me this grid and this grid, and it's got that ID number that I was actually telling you about. It's not physically showing me where it is. So if I go show, and we can hit show a couple of times, it will start taking me through to a view where I can actually get this. If we actually just zoom in there, you'll actually see that as I click on each one, it's highlighting it. And I can keep it in show until I find the best possible view to actually see what's going on here. Okay, so come into here, I've got several options. I can postpone it, i.e. maybe I've got to get back in touch with the architect to find out why he's moved that grid. I can reject it. It might be something that's happened and say, well, you can't do that. If you do that, we can't actually fix the problem. I can accept the difference, i.e. that grid line's moved, but the architect's moved back for his purpose. I'm going to leave mine where it is because that wall's on a grid, but my steelwork is going to stay where it is. Now, if you do accept the difference, what will happen is, and this is where it gets quite clever, is that Revit will then still monitor the location of both them grid lines, but it'll monitor the relative difference between them two grid lines. So if the architect then moves grid line D again, even by a small amount, it is going to notify me that that is another change that I need to be aware of. So what I'm going to do in this case is I'm just going to go modify, and I'm going to let it update it itself. I hit apply. It's now moved that grid line. Yeah. The position of an opening is moved. Yes, I have to move the door, if you remember, as well. So it's even noticed that the door opening is moved. So we'll say, okay, yeah, move the door opening for me. We'll come into here. The wall height's changed. Yeah, so we'll say, yeah, modify that. And we'll say, okay, yeah, modify that, move that into summation. And we'll come down to the last one, and we'll also say in here, yeah, modify that, hit apply. Okay, so it's now allowed me to basically update my model, as you can see, based on the architect's changes. So I'm still fully coordinated. And if I go to the 3D view, we can actually see we've got shaded, look, where the steelwork and this column here has also shifted in line with the grid line. Last thing I'm just going to do, launch a final project, and this project will be mechanical. Okay, and click OK. And we can do the same thing in here. So what I'll do is I'll just quickly go to Insert, Revit Link. We'll start off with the, I'll just go to my desktop, I'm in the right place. We'll just link the arc model in. We'll go origin to origin. Okay, it's telling me that there's another link, but it will not appear because it understands that link's in there. Shouldn't have an issue. And then what I can also do is say, okay, everything there, I'm reasonably happy with that. Next thing I just need to do is manage coordinates, acquire the coordinates, just so we're running the same coordinate system. And then I can start to draw maybe some ductwork in here. So we'll just put a little bit of ductwork as my supply air. Yeah, and then we'll also put return air in there as well. Okay, so we now have, if I look at my view, we've now got an M&E model in there as well. Yeah, the height and the elevation is related to the mech levels. I can change them afterwards anyway. But we've now got a mech model as well. So we'll just save this now to my desktop, and this is our MEP. Okay. So the next thing I want to do now is I want to move this across to Navisworks. Now, I can use the, within Navisworks, I can just export these out as RBTs and import them in Navis as RBT. But the usual way of sharing it would be through something like an NWC. It's a very highly intelligent, almost PDF. It's a locked file format, so if you're sending this external to the company, no one else is going to actually be able to influence it. So we'll just save this out, and we'll call this MEP. We'll save it from that 3D view. We've got the structural model. What I'm actually going to do in here as well is just go File, Export, NWC file, Struct, save that one out. And also, oops, go to my architect's model and do an export NWC from here. Okay. So imagine these now have all been sent off to the contractor or the BIM manager or BIM coordinator, whoever's looking and heading up the project, and we can now start to look at coordinating this all in Navisworks. So here we are now in Navisworks. One thing to remember about Navisworks is not a design software. You cannot modify the building within here. It is a review package, and it's a sequence in 4D and 5D, 6D to a certain extent as well. But any changes that have to be made to the models need to be done within the native package. If you do happen to have the original file, then you can use something called switchback, which will allow it to switch back to the native package and then allow you to modify it. Now, the one nice thing about Navisworks is its ability to read pretty much any file format that's actually out there. It was actually developed in Sheffield with Navisworks before it became an Autodesk package. And that was the essence, that it could read pretty much any file that you threw at it. it's like the glue, yeah. And interestingly enough, Autodesk have actually got their online version of their cloud-based version of Navisworks, which is called BIM 360 Glue. And it is the glue that pulls all the information together from civils, the architecture structures, the M&E, regardless of what packages are actually being used by them disciplines. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, now that I'm in here, is I'm going to append the files that we found. So let's just go to my desktop, and in here we will find our various NWC files. So let's just go display that as a list, and let's find the NWCs. Okay, there we go. So there's my arc file, and I can load that in. Okay, so there's now my architecture file. And notice it's fetched the style across. It's quite nice how it actually fetches that in stylized. I can then append in the other two files, and all being well, it will read the shared coordinates, and it's totally fetched that in as I would expect through the shared coordinate system. Okay, if I actually just go to my options in here, and I've got my file readers. Okay, I exported this out as an NWC anyway, so it uses these settings here, and I can actually change the coordinates. If I want to, I could actually have the project coordinates set up instead. These are the same settings that you would use internal to Revit to change the settings of how it creates the NWC. So when I created the NWC, it's actually using these shared coordinates. Okay. It's also using the last view that you had open as well. So we now have our model here coordinated together within Navisworks. So the first thing that I actually want to show you is the timeliner and how we can actually timeline the construction. Now, the timeliner functionality is up here. So if I hit timeliner, this will now give me the timeliner tools. If I'm using some project planning software, maybe I'm using Microsoft Project, Asta Power Project, Primavera, etc., then I could actually go to data sources here, and I could actually link that in. Okay, so we can actually link in our project plan. As it is, I'm not going to do that. I'm actually going to do this from scratch. So what we're going to do is we're going to construct this building. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is, obviously it's not complete, we haven't got the foundations in, but I'm going to start adding tasks. And I can come in here and I can start to add tasks. And the first task that I'm going to do is add the structural columns, yeah, so struct Cs. Yeah. Then we'll add in the structural beams. Then we can do the walls external. Then we can do the walls internal, complete with the doors. Okay. Then once we've done that, we'll do the air supply, and then we'll do the air return. Okay. So I've started to add in all the different tasks that I need to do on this building. So we'll come back to the top. I now have a planned and an actual start date. This will allow me to, further on during the actual construction phase, actually dictate whether we're ahead of schedule or behind schedule. So I can come into here. Here's my planned start. So I plan to start putting the structural columns in today, and hopefully we should finish that by Saturday. Okay. Structural beams, we'll start putting them in on Saturday, because I like people to work the weekends, and then we can assume that we're going to finish that, say, by Monday. Okay. External walls will come in afterwards. Now, the external walls, we could start putting them up possibly at the same time that the beams are going in. Health and safety maybe might be an issue. Or we can maybe wait it, leave it a day. So we'll go the 4th again, and they'll be finished, say, by next Friday. Internal walls, yeah, we'll do that from next Friday to Sunday. Okay. Notice as well over here, but as I'm typing all this information in, look, it's actually starting to build my Gantt chart up. Yeah. Now the idea that I then take this across over to a project management software is we can't do critical path analysis in here, etc., and we can't do all the nice little tweaks that you can put in there. But we can export this later on, look, out to Microsoft Project or to a CSV, which you can take into other project management software. So it's always quite, you could actually start doing your project plan in here. Okay. So once that's done, that's up onto the 10th of May. Then what we'll do is they can be going in at the same time. So what we'll say is at the same time as the internal walls are going in, say on the 8th, 8th to the 10th, we'll put that in, and also here, 8th to the 10th, taking a bit longer. So we'll actually have that into the 12th. Okay. So we've now got a project plan. The only thing we've got is I'm not told it what it's actually doing on these dates, believe it or not. So if we actually look at the top here, what is it actually doing with the structural columns between the 30th to the 2nd? Yeah. So what is the task type? So this is where we come in and we're going. Are we constructing an element? Are we demolishing it so we can use this for actually demolition work? Is it temporary? The one thing that we can start to look at within Navis is temporary structures, scaffolding, the site office, yeah, where is storage on site, where we're actually going to put all our materials, how the JCBs, how the cranes, now the equipment is going to move around the site as well. So we can timeline these items in there as well. So you can actually start to looking at using it from a health and safety point of view as well. So in this case, we are just looking at construction. So what I can do is I could select multiple items at once. We'll just come down the list and put all these in as construct. Okay. The next thing I need to do is I need to say, well, what is it I'm actually doing? What am I actually constructing? So we know that I'm constructing here the structural columns, but I need to attach these elements now to my timeline of simulation. Okay. So there's various ways I can do that. If I come into my project, my selection tree, here's all my projects. Now this is one of the nice things about the way that Navis works with Revit files. It is intelligent enough to fetch in the elements that come across correctly. So here's my columns on level 1, and I've got my structural framing. Okay. So what I can actually then do is I can start to look at the elements in question. So let's go to my columns, and I want all my structural columns to be constructed. What we can do is if we have multiple elements that we want to select, notice it's selecting over there, we can actually save these. And we can save these as what we call a selection set. So I can save selection. Now, practically this is the way that I would actually use Revit, use Navisworks. I can have a selection set or a search set. The advantage of using selection sets and search sets is it allows you to group elements together so you don't have to reselect things every time. By using what we call a search set, I could actually set up a search criteria to find all columns. I can then save them searches, so the next time I start a new project, I can reload in my search criteria and generate either selection sets from the searches or just leave them as a search set. The one thing to remember is if the model changes, a search set will find new elements that match the criteria in the search set options. If you create a selection set, that is a static shot of them elements at that point. So you might select all the columns and create a selection set. If new columns are added as the model is being developed, they will be excluded because you haven't added, you have to manually re-add them to the selection set. So that's my set. Go back into here. I just want the structural columns. Let's just dock that second just so that I can go structural columns, and we will drag them into there. Okay. Then I want all my beams. Yeah. So we've got my beams, and we'll copy them on there. Yeah. External walls. Yeah. I could just select them as an object, or we could come into here. Look, here's all the external walls. So let's put them in. Internal walls. Yeah. Help if that's just a bit bigger so I can actually get to where the internal walls is. There we go. Notice here it's telling me that it's an explicit selection. It would tell me if there was a search set and the search set options. Okay. I also want all the doors. So just drag all the doors onto the internal walls as well. Let's just do doors and then wall partitions to make sure that I don't replace what's already in there. And then we've got the air supply, yeah, which I can actually use the control key, select that, yeah. I can even select them in there, drop them in, and then my return, and we can drag them in as well. Okay. So I now have the model set up. I've got elements in there. Yeah. Notice it says cost at the end. I can actually add a cost value directly into here. But what I can also do is if I go to my columns and I put this to be extended, I can then start to look at each stage in this project, and I can start to put costs down related to the material cost, its labour cost, equipment cost, subcon cost, and it'll then give me a total cost based on that as well. Okay. We can also link scripts and animation in, so we can actually have bits animated where maybe a crane's coming in and out to animate that as well. So let's actually simulate this. If I now go to my simulation screen, you'll notice that the columns are actually just showing up there in green. That's telling me that they're on time, but they're currently under construction. If I hit the play button now, this will actually go through. We can actually see the timeline. Now they're finished. The beams are coming in, the walls are coming in, the beams have just been finished. It's not going to show you the wall growing, but the walls will stay green during their construction phase. Okay? And then we can start to see the rest of it coming in. So we've actually got a construction animation coming in of how that building is going together. What we can also do, and this is nothing stopping me doing this, if I go to my output, we can actually create an animation from that timeliner, and then we can send that timeliner animation off to anybody that might want to actually see that. Okay. So that's the timeliner, a really powerful functionality. One of the features that we've been adding and developing into Navisworks over the last 3 releases now is the quantification tools. So a few years ago, Autodesk had a product called QTO. That's now been shelved. And we started to put the tools into Navis. To start with, we just put 3D quantification in. Last year, we put the 2D takeoff quantification in. And this year now, we've added to that by giving us the PDF function. So one of the things we can now do is if I go to Append, I do actually have the option in here to add Adobe PDF files in, which is quite a nice function. Okay, so let's cancel that. Just go into my quantification. Okay, that's the model we're going to use. Project setup, I need to set up the model to use a catalog. In this case, we'll just use the Uniformat catalog. Hit finish. And now we have a quantification workbook. These can all be customized, and we can set these up as we're going on each project. This will get expanded and expanded and expanded. So we can start to come in, and I can start to look at my my shell of my building, yeah, the exterior enclosure, exterior walls, and then I can create in my item catalog. Notice it's in the same place, a new item, and I could call this the exterior 100 brick, 100 cavity, 100 block, yeah, plaster, yeah. So I can set my wall type up, I can set a colour for the takeoff, etc. I can also start to put in here length equals model length, but then in this case it's a 3D takeoff, so it understands its volume and all its values. If I was doing a 2D takeoff, I could actually tell it that if that line is 4 meters long, it's 310 millimeters wide, and the makeup, and we can start to get exact takeoffs of that wall. I also have a resource catalog. Now, the resource catalog allows me to add elements into my takeoff which don't physically appear within my model. So, for instance, if I was going to do a takeoff of this door, the door would just register as being a door. I could add the correct ironmongery to that door. I could say that door's got 8 hinges, and for each hinge there's 8 screws, and then I can get the exact values for everything. Okay? And then I could start to, with my external walls, click on my external wall, right-click, quantification, and I can take that off to that area there. Okay? What I could also do is, rather than creating all my individual subcategories, if I actually come in and just create a section box around this object, I can select all that, and I can right-click, quantification, and I can take that off to a new catalog item. And that will generate all the individual items, the structure of the model, the layers, the items in that layers as well. Once I've taken that off, the one thing we can add within Navisworks at this point is the costings. That would be done by the QS externally, but I can actually take all these out to either an XML or to an Excel spreadsheet. We'll save this out to my desktop. Should ask me if I want to open the file, say yes. And then this will launch Excel, and in here now we've actually got the quantities of every item in there. If I actually come into here and go to my group by row, here we have all the elements, each item's number of them items. If I go to there, we've got, in fact, this bottom one, look, we've got 12 items of this structural frame. So there's 12 UB305, 102, 25. Okay. Every single item in that model can be added. And as I say, if I then got the other catalogue with that, the resource catalogue, it will start to add the other elements in there. So really, really powerful. Now, there are 2 versions of Navisworks. There's Navisworks Simulate, and there's Navisworks Manage. There's also a product called Navisworks Freedom. Navisworks Freedom is the free downloadable viewer which will allow you to view an NWD file. The NWD file is a file that we create by actually exporting out our file. So I can actually publish this file to an NWD, and then someone can actually download the free viewer, they can open it, they can see the timeline, they can see the reports, and they can start to sort of navigate the building. If you actually do create an NWD, you can actually go File and just do a Save As, and you can save an NWD out of here. The reason that I always recommend people use the Publish is this will allow us to put comments in about the file. It allows us to put a password in there, so if this is a sensitive project and we don't want anybody to be able to open it, we can put a password. Probably one of my favorite features in here is the ability to add an expiry date. Because we can add an expiry date, we can make sure that people haven't got access to out-of-date information. The last thing we want is to have a revised model, and then for that person that's got the revised model to not be basically using it. So we're using the old file. If we can actually expire that, it's going to be really, really useful. Okay. So the biggest difference between our two files, the two versions, the managed and the simulate, is the class detector. Okay. So what I've got in here is I've actually got our class detector. So I'll come into class detective, and I can start to now clash objects against other objects. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a test. And the test that I'm actually going to add is I'm going to check that the architect and the MEP model fit together correctly. Okay. I'm going to check the geometry against the geometry. I'm going to look to check a hard test. So this is actually going to be a hard test check to make sure that if an object touches, that is a clash. I've also got the option of adding a hard conservative, i.e. if it hits each other but only just, i.e. in this case by a millimeter, then that's not an issue. A clearance, make sure that the gap between two objects is absolutely spot on as well. And also check for duplicates, but in this case just a hard check. Hit run, and it's actually found several problems. And as you can see, if I click on each one, it's actually going to highlight, let's move this out of the way slightly, where them problems are. Yeah. I can then assign this to people. I can come in, I can assign this to, I'll assign this to Simon Dickinson Fix. Okay, I can do that to all of them. I can also create a report. So what I'll do is I'm going to create a report, HTML report. We'll write that report, test 1, just to my desktop. And then what I can do is come into my report. Just minimize all these. Okay, let's just minimize that as well. And here's my report. Double click on there. Here we have a report that's printed with an image that I can then click on to see exactly where it is. It'll also give me information about the grid and the level that it's actually associated to as well. Okay. So let's now go back and fix this. Yeah. Close the class detective down. And what I'm going to do is just do a save on this project, and we'll just call it webinar model. Okay. And then we'll just start a new one so I can close that file down. Okay. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to come back to my architect file, and let's just go to Insert, Revit Links, and let's link in the model, the MEP model. Okay. So we now have our MEP model, and we can now start to see where I need to create some openings. So what I'll do is come into here, let's just create a couple of sections. Create a section there, and we'll create a section here. That helps if you're looking in the right direction. Okay, so here we go. Select my wall. Let's just edit the profile, and I'm just going to put a nice big hole through the wall. Yeah, and then we'll go to our other section, and select that wall, edit the profile. And we'll put the hole through there as well. Finish. Okay. So I've now rectified that. Hit save, and I will also now export that back out as an NWC, and we'll override the same file. We'll replace that file. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do, come back into here now. Let's just open up our webinar model. Okay. And hopefully it's looking a bit strange. I don't know what's going on here with the visual views. think one of the visualizations gone. We'll carry on and see how we go. So now it's giving me an exclamation mark here to tell me that the file has been updated, that something's changed in that file. Okay. So what I can do is I can click on here and I can update my results. Notice at the moment I've got 4 clashes on that test. 4 of them are new. If I now update that, I've got 4 clashes, but most importantly, I've now got 4 resolves. And that's the important thing. So now we've all gone to the correct color, and what we should be able to see now is we've actually got the hole in there. It's displaying correctly in this view for some strange reason, but we've now got the clash detection working. Okay, this is a very, very powerful feature. It is the only difference between Navisworks Simulate and Navisworks Manage is this tool. But on a very complicated project, this has obviously been done quite simplistically, but we can start to not only find the clashes, but we can then manage the process of fixing them. One of the features I do like is if you rerun this check and it finds a new clash, i.e. we've fixed one thing, but by actually creating a fix for one issue, we've caused a problem elsewhere, it will then log that as a new clash. So we'll then go to 5, and it'll tell us that one of them is new. In the results, they are all color coordinated based on these options. What you can do as well is you can actually tell Navisworks that a problem is approved, i.e. you look at it, in reality that wouldn't be an issue on site, so you can actually tell it almost to ignore that problem as well. So really, really powerful. Just quickly to finish off, we're sort of 50 minutes in now. One of the other ways that we can collaborate as well as being able to share our data between the disciplines, it's actually working internally. If you've got a large project, then you might have more than one person working on the same project at the same time. And within Revit, we've got something called work sharing. So I can come into work sharing here and I can turn work sharing on for this little file. Okay? So I'm actually just going to open this up, and this will now create a work shared file. And it's created 2 work sets, if you like. So all the model elements to start with have all been put onto a work set called work set 1, and the levels of grids have been put onto there. These are the user-created work sets, and these are the only work sets you need to worry about. One of the things that Revit will do is it will create a work set for absolutely everything. Every family will go on a work set, the standards go on a work set, the views. You don't really need to worry too much about them because they're managed in the background by the software. But these are the important ones. So once I've done this, now what I need to do is I need to save this file. And I'm just going to do a save as, because I want to save this as a central file. So we'll just create a new folder on my desktop called workset. Okay. And then within here, I'm going to save this as a workset file. If I go options, it's going to, when I go to save, it's going to make this a central file. So with worksets, we have a central file, and then every user that wants to work on that can work remotely, but in the same organization, but on a shared version of this. So it's called the local copy, if you like. So we'll hit save. There we go. That's now going to save that out. And the next thing I want to do is I want to close this, because once we've set work sets up, we don't normally work on that central file directly. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is, I'm be a bit strange after what I've just said, is I'm going to come into open. I'm going to open the central file. But what it's going to do is it's going to create a copy of that, a local copy in my project folder. So it'll set that up, and you might be able to see this on the webinar, but at the top here it says it's arc_Simon D. The reason it's got Simon D is because it's picked that up as my username. My username is listed in here, look, so Simon D, and I can change that. So this is now my local version of this file. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come into here now, into this other version, and I'm just going to basically change the name of the user in here. So we'll call this guy Fred. And then Fred is also going to open up from the desktop, from the work set file. It's going to create a new local copy. Okay. So now we've got 2 people separately working on the same file. And ignore that, it's fine, it's on the desktop. Come into here, and then what I can start to do is, as Fred, is I can now start to create other objects. So I'm going to put another office in, so we can put this in, okay? And I can then say, right, create similar, and we'll pop a door in there as well. Now, the one thing to remember about work sets is it's not live, yeah? So if I come now back to Simon's model, notice that we haven't got the change in here. And the way that I'm working at the moment is a way called borrowing, so we're actually borrowing these work sets, okay? So I can access anything I like at the moment. I can start to make changes. But if I move this door, because I didn't do it earlier, and then Fred realizes that door needs moving and he tries to move it, it won't let him because I've just done it. So in the background there is a whole change management tool going on at the moment that's making sure that as soon as I take control of an element, that element is locked to me until I save my changes. Okay? So I'll basically ignore that at the moment, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to synchronize my changes. I'm going to allow Fred to save the changes here. If I now go back to Simon, still can't see the changes, but as soon as I now synchronize as well, what we should find is that that wall and the door now appear in here. So it allows me to work separately to my colleagues, but then as we're saving, we're both working on the same file at the same time. The idea of being able to borrow is very, very powerful. If, on the other hand, we don't want to use it using the borrowing method, then what we can do is we can come in and we can start to break our model down into new work sets. So we'd have like an external envelope for all our external walls and windows, and that might also include the floor slabs which are connected to the external walls. We might then have a different work set for each level. There's various different ways that we can actually break this down, but the one thing to remember is we don't want to overcomplicate the model. As a rule of thumb, we should have no more than 3 to 4 work sets per person working on the project, and no more than a maximum of about 15 to 20 work sets for the entire project. If we can try and keep the lower numbers, otherwise it complicates things later on. Because the one thing that we can do is, where it says owners here, I can take ownership of an item, and then I can take that work set home and I can work offline, so I do not need to be connected to the server. This allows offline working. If you've got offices across different cities, sort of faraway locations, and you want to use work sets, saving back the central file over an internal link on the network or through VPN can be very slow and not recommended. For situations like that, we do have something called Revit Server. Revit Server is free. It ships with Revit. It just needs configuring on 2 separate objects. So basically, it goes on 2 servers, Windows 2008 R2 servers on both sites, and we can have local centralized files. Work sharing, very complicated system in the background, but incredibly easy to use. And if you're using the borrowing method, it takes seconds to actually set up. So hopefully that's been sort of quite informative of sort of a real intro of how we can actually work with sharing our data and coordinating this information. The whole BIM process from the Autodesk portfolio all talks to each other. And by utilizing that central, the shared coordinates, we can even link them shared coordinates as well to Civil 3D. So the civil engineers can actually share that as well. So as I say, I hope that's been really, really useful for you guys. We've got a short period of time left if anyone's got any questions. So if you want to ask any questions, we've actually got the chat box at the bottom of the screen. So feel free just to type in a message there, and I'll do my best to answer them. Okay. Don't seem to be getting any questions. That's not a problem. As I say, you saw my email on my slide. So if you do have any questions and you do just want to drop me an email, please feel free to do so, and I'll do my best to answer any of them. So thank you very much for your attendance this afternoon. And again, I hope you've enjoyed yourself. Thank you very much.